America was first native to Native Americans way before English settlements and Spanish settlements. Due to the interactions between the new settlers and Native Americans, the percentage of deaths went up, mostly due to infections and new diseases being introduced from the old world. Uh, Once America or the new settlers were going into the continent, there was many conflicts between them, creating a lot of deaths, war, destruction of villages, destruction of families, mostly due to different cultures and different ideologies. Once America was settled and it was now a new country, uh, Native Americans were set into reservations. However, there were many broken treaties, and even during this time, there was still wars, Native American wars, and this created a lot of death. Even though they were now in peace, you could say there was still war and death, mass genocide of them.
And one thing to note is that the Wounded Knee Massacre, which is basically the end of the American Indian Wars in 1890, was one of the most notable massacres of the American Indian Wars that we'll get later on the American Indian movement will get later too, once they're established.
However, there was many wars that the United States was going through, and the level of Native Americans was each time going higher. There were more and more Native Americans joining the military. One of the most noticeable wars that the Native Americans had a great impact was World War II, in which many of them were code talkers or simply just infantrymen.
And it's said that Native Americans had the highest percentage of their own population that actually enlisted in the war and fought in the war.
After that, from going to a war zone, which they had more liberty than they had in their own homeland, they came back to their own reservations where poverty, famine, alcoholism struck their communities, leaving them way behind. There was not as many opportunities. Education was very limited to the community. This led to a sense of unification against one common problem that they all shared. This unification was spread across the country.
And this created the start of the American Indian movement in 1968, created by Dennis Banks, Clyde Bellencourt, and
Eddie Benton.
And this is something that was prevalent for Native Americans for 500 years before it was actually created, but it had never been introduced as a formal organization.
The original purpose was to help Native American Indians in urban ghettos who had been displaced by government programs that had the effect of forcing them into reservations. It was pretty much to save them from their own poverty.
From their own demise, basically.
Yeah. This led to many uprisings. Most of them were nonviolent.
But there were other ones. There were many marches like the one on Alcatraz and Wounded Knee, where, as I said before, Wounded Knee was one of the most notable massacres in the American Indian War. So this caused the movement to march east onto Washington D.C. because they were trying to get some type of response to it, basically.
One of the big problems was that most Native Americans, even though they were here before English settlers, they were still not given the opportunity of being citizens to the land. So one very huge impact that their marches had was that in 1975 there was an act of the Indian Citizenship Act, which gave them the ability to be actual citizens and have the same powers as a citizen.
And this was a result of incidents like Wounded Knee, where there was a standoff between the FBI and CIA and Native American marches, and this resulted in 2 people being dead, 12 that were wounded, and over 1,200 were arrested. And this would lead to the arrest of Clyde Bellencourt, George Mitchell, Dennis Banks, and Eddie Benton Benai, who were main leaders of the resistance.
They were arrested and they kind of surrendered in May 8th. They had charges of just simply being creating.
It's inciting riots, basically,
Yeah.
and provoking endangerment of society and stuff like that.
After that, Congress took no steps to honor the broken Indian treaties. However, other treaties that were passed or acts that were passed during this movement was kept, but older treaties were simply vanished and were never taken care of.
But as a result of the American Indian movement, the Native Americans did create the opportunity for acts that would grant them citizenship and voting rights, just the same as African Americans and other minority groups were. And ta-da! This is the end.